Welcome. Welcome to the deep dive. You know, it feels like everywhere you turn these days, you hear terms like fake news, disinformation,
Oh,
misinformation.
absolutely. It's constant.
It's in our social feeds, on the news, people argue about it at dinner, and it presents itself as this intensely modern, overwhelming problem, doesn't it? Like it just burst onto the scene
Yeah,
recently.
like a uniquely 21st century thing.
Exactly. We're just bombarded and honestly trying to figure out what's real and what's not. It can feel like a full-time job sometimes.
It really can. Information overload is real.
So our mission today, really, is to offer you a shortcut, a way to genuinely get well-informed about this whole complex information disorder. We're going to take a proper deep dive. We'll look at its surprising history, how it's evolved so dramatically, and, the huge ways it shapes how we all understand the world. And hopefully, we'll uncover some unexpected facts, keep things interesting.
That's the plan. Because you're right, fake news might be the buzzword now, but the actual things behind it, disinformation, misinformation, hoaxes, they're ancient.
Right.
Maybe we should clarify those terms up front because people do use them interchangeably and they're not quite the same.
Good idea. Let's do that.
Okay, so disinformation. Think of that as verifiably false or misleading information. The key thing is it's designed, presented, and spread with a specific intention to deceive.
Malicious intent, basically.
Exactly. Often for economic gain, political reasons, some kind of benefit. Misinformation, though, that's different. It's still wrong or misleading information. But it's spread without that malicious intent. Someone might share something false because they genuinely believe it's true, or they just didn't check.
Okay. Less sinister, maybe, but still problematic.
Definitely still problematic. And then you've got hoaxes. These are deliberate fabrications designed to deceive, often with really astonishing claims. Sometimes it's malicious, sometimes it's just, for a laugh, but the goal is always to trick people.
Got it. Disinformation, misinformation, hoaxes.
Oh.
Different flavors of false.
Pretty much. And our journey today, it's going to take us through millennia. We'll start way back with the earliest whispers of this stuff. Then we'll move through the big shifts like the printing press, a huge one.
Oh, yeah.
And finally, we'll get to the, let's say, unprecedented challenges of the digital age we're living in now.
So looking back helps us understand now.
Absolutely. Seeing the history helps you appreciate the context. You can see what's genuinely new about today's information environment and what's just, old patterns playing out with new technology.
It's so easy to just assume fake news is all about algorithms and social media, a totally modern thing.
Right.
But looking at our sources, it's kind of stunning how deep these roots go. So how far back are we talking? Where do we find the first real examples of this? And what do they tell us about, us, about why we fall for it?
Oh, we're talking ancient history. Seriously, deep roots. One of the most well-documented early examples, you have to go back to ancient Rome, around 44 BC. It's Octavian's propaganda campaign against Mark Antony and Cleopatra. And how he did it is fascinating. Our sources say he used short, sharp slogans written upon coins.
On coins, seriously.
In the style of archaic tweets. Think about that. Targeted, super concise messages right in people's hands, just like a modern social media blast in a way.
Wow, what kind of slogans?
They weren't subtle. They basically painted Antony as a womanizer and a drunk, made him out to be Cleopatra's puppet, totally corrupted by their affair.
To a political smear campaign? Roman style.
Exactly. And here's the kicker. This campaign was so effective that, as our sources put it, fake news had allowed Octavian to hack the Republican system once and for all.
Hack the system.
It led directly to him becoming Augustus, the first Roman emperor. It just shows the incredible power of targeted disinformation for political gain, even with, ancient tech, hammered metal coin.
It proves the desire to control the narrative is just fundamental and adapts to whatever tools are available.
Precisely. And it wasn't just a Roman or Western thing. If you look at early Chinese history, there's this amazing book called The Book of Swindles.
The Book of Swindles. Love that title.
Right. Compiled around 1617, late Ming Dynasty. It's China's first known collection of stories about frauds, swindles, hoaxes, you name it. It really shows this stuff is global and has been around for ages.
So humans have always been trying to trick each other, basically.
It seems so. And in the West, another really early recorded hoax, quite a famous one in its time, was The Drummer of Tedworth in 1661.
A Drummer of Tedworth. What was that?
It was this elaborate story, a total fabrication, about ghostly drumming sounds haunting a house, designed purely to shock and fascinate people. a sensational tale meant to spread far and wide by word of mouth.
Like an early viral story.
Kind of. These early examples, they really show that making up and spreading false, often amazing-sounding stories. It's been part of human communication for centuries. It taps into our curiosity, maybe our gullibility, too.
What strikes me about all this is how it already shows our basic human vulnerabilities. Right. And the sheer power of a good story to shape how we see things, even without tweets or TV.
Absolutely. It's not just about big political plots either. Think about how fast rumors still spread today, even in a small group. An office, a neighborhood.
Oh yeah, gossip travels fast.
It's this timeless human thing, being swayed by a compelling narrative, especially if it confirms what we already think or just gives us something juicy to talk about. The human element, believing the story, it's always been there, just waiting for new amplifiers.
And speaking of amplifiers,
Yeah.
this brings us to technology. Because that human tendency got a massive boost with certain inventions. And few were bigger than the Gutenberg printing press, surely.
Absolutely monumental, a real turning point.
This was the tech that just cranked everything up to 11, including the ability to spread, well, fake news on a scale nobody could have imagined before.
You've nailed it. Gutenberg, around 1450. Before that, information moved slowly. Hand-copied text, word of mouth, limited reach. But suddenly, with print, as one source says, invented facts took off at the same time that news began to circulate widely in Europe. It was a total shift. False info could move from just local rumors to printed sheets reaching huge anonymous crowds.
It sounds almost like the internet of its day.
That's a very common analogy, and it's pretty accurate. The printing press, like the internet, fundamentally changed how we share and get information. It democratized it, in a way, but it also democratized the manipulation of information.
Which leads us to bigger hoaxes.
Exactly. It led to what's often called the first large-scale news hoax, the Great Moon Hoax of 1835. This one is just fascinating.
The moon hoax. Tell me more.
Okay, so the New York Sun newspaper published 6 articles, incredibly detailed articles, about the supposed discovery of life on the moon.
Life on the moon in 1835.
Yep. And they didn't hold back. They had vivid descriptions, even illustrations of humanoid bat creatures and bearded blue unicorns.
Bat creatures and unicorns. Seriously. People bought this.
They did. Because the articles claimed they were reporting the findings of a very famous astronomer, Sir John Herschel. That gave it this veneer of scientific credibility.
The appeal to authority.
Exactly. The impact was huge. It really highlights how much people were starting to trust print media as, inherently truthful, a vulnerability we still see today with online sources, right?
Definitely. Trusting the platform, not just the content.
And it set a pattern. One source notes how conflicts, regime change, and catastrophes then became markers for the dissemination of disinformation. People are maybe more willing to believe extraordinary things in extraordinary times.
That makes sense. But wasn't there an even earlier one involving Jonathan Swift?
Yes, good point. Even earlier, 1708. Swift's almanac hoax. He wrote under a fake name, Isaac Bickerstaff.
Okay.
And he published this fake almanac predicting, very specifically, the death of John Partridge, who was a famous astrologer in England at the time.
Predicted his death.
On a specific day. And then, Swift being Swift, he followed up on that exact day with a published elegy, like a funeral poem, for Partridge.
No way. What happened to Partridge?
Well, he obviously wasn't dead, but his professional reputation was ruined. His own real almanac wasn't published for 6 years after that.
Wow. So even back then, fake news could have real-world consequences, destroy careers.
Absolutely. It shows the tangible harm these media manipulations could cause long before the internet age.
So what's the takeaway here? Even with what seems like simple tech to us now, just print if you had the intent, a good story, and this new way to spread it.
You could reach a massive audience and have a real impact. It absolutely set the stage for how easily we could be fooled by the printed word. That idea, if it's in print, it must be true, became a weakness that hoaxers quickly learned to exploit. We started trusting the source, the medium, maybe more than we should have.
Okay, so moving forward in time, we get to the 20th century. And things get even more intense, right? Global wars, powerful new media like radio and television.
Exactly. The stakes get higher, the technology gets more powerful, and the landscape of information and deception shifts onto a truly global scale. Propaganda becomes way more sophisticated, and even entertainment starts messing with our sense of reality.
Let's talk about propaganda first. Wars seem like fertile ground for this stuff.
Incredibly fertile ground. The 20th century saw propaganda become a central part of conflict. Take the Boer War, late 1890s, early 1900s. The British Army used propaganda really effectively to create and popularize this negative Boer stereotype.
Why?
To sway public opinion back home. It was an unpopular war in South Africa, so they needed to dehumanize the enemy and rally support. Calculated stuff.
And World War I.
Took it to another level. Propaganda was crucial for recruitment. You know the famous posters, "Your country needs you." Direct appeals to nationalism and patriotism to get people to sign up.
But it got darker than recruitment posters, didn't it?
Much darker. There was the story of the German corpse factory in 1917. This was British propaganda claiming the Germans were so short on fats because of the British naval blockade that they were boiling down the bodies of their own soldiers.
Boiling down bodies. For what?
For fats, bone meal, even pig food, the story claimed. Just horrific stuff.
And the impact.
Besides being gruesome propaganda, it had this terrible long-term effect. Years later during World War II, when early, accurate reports of the Holocaust started coming out.
People didn't believe them.
Some people doubted them, yes, because they remembered the corpse factory story and thought, oh, it's just atrocity propaganda again. It shows how really egregious lies can poison the well for future truths. It raises that critical question. How does past deception erode future trust?
That's chilling. And then, of course, there's Nazi propaganda.
A truly terrifying example of systematic state-run deception. Joseph Goebbels set up the whole Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda specifically to pump out messages of hatred inciting violence against Jews.
And it worked.
Our sources say it was essential to motivating those who implemented the mass murder and also crucial in securing the acquiescence of millions of others as bystanders. Just shows the devastating power of relentless, hateful propaganda.
And after World War II, the Cold War.
The methods shifted slightly. International broadcasting became huge. Radio Free Europe, Voice of America, Radio Moscow, all harnessed to influence populations to take sides in that big ideological fight. Information as a Cold War weapon.
It seems like every conflict had its own brand of information manipulation.
Vietnam.
Oh yeah, the Vietnam War had the optimism campaign.
Right.
U.S. briefings were famously nicknamed the 5 o'clock follies because they were seen as overly rosy. And they pushed the domino theory hard.
Right. The idea that if Vietnam fell to communism, all its neighbors would too.
Exactly. It was used as a fear tactic, really, to shut down opposition to the war back home, control the narrative through fear.
And even apartheid South Africa used this globally. They did. From the 70s into the 90s, the apartheid government ran this sophisticated, secret, global propaganda campaign. They were lobbying, trying to win support, counter the anti-apartheid movement, targeting influential people in Western capitals.
Secretly. How did it come out?
Local investigative reporters eventually exposed the whole thing, a reminder that good journalism can be a powerful antidote, even against hidden state campaigns.
It's incredible how states use these tools. But then there's that weird intersection with entertainment, like the War of the Worlds broadcast. That wasn't state propaganda, but it caused chaos, right? Or did it?
Orson Welles, 1938, a legendary moment. So Welles and his team adapted H.G. Wells' novel to sound like real news bulletins breaking in for regular programming. Martian invasion of New Jersey.
And they meant for people to panic.
Actually, no. They apparently thought the story was too silly and improbable. They were just trying desperately to make it sound halfway believable as drama, and almost by accident, they succeeded way beyond what they imagined.
So the panic was real.
Well, that's debated. Wells later claimed he wanted to teach people a lesson about not believing everything on the radio. His collaborators said, we were just trying to make a good show.
But how did they make it sound so real? What were the tricks?
Several clever things. The pacing was key. Slow start, build realism, then boom, rapid escalation like a real emergency. And crucially, they put the station break really late in the show.
Why did that matter?
Because people tuning in late, who missed the opening disclaimer saying it was fiction, would hear what sounded like frantic news reports for maybe 40 minutes before hearing it was just a play. Radio listeners expected station IDs more often.
Sneaky.
Also, they cast an actor, Kenneth Delmar, who did a perfect impression of President Roosevelt for the Secretary of the Interior's speech. That lent huge credibility, even though impersonating the president wasn't usually allowed.
Wow.
And the actors studied real disaster recordings, like the Hindenburg crash, to get the panicked voices just right. They created this whole immersive, terrifying soundscape.
Okay, so the impact. Was there mass hysteria in the streets?
Here's where it gets interesting. Later audience research, Hooper ratings, suggested the actual panic was tiny. Maybe only 2% of households were even listening there. Most people were tuned into a much more popular comedy show on another network.
Only 2%. So the legend is bigger than the reality.
It seems the perception of widespread hysteria became the big cultural thing, which is a lesson in itself, isn't it? How the story about the event can overshadow the event itself. We see that today, too.
Absolutely. But you mentioned a tragic side.
Yeah, a Spanish-language version was broadcast in Ecuador in 1949. That one apparently did cause a real panic, which turned into a deadly riot when people found out it was a hoax. 6 people died.
Oh my God. That's awful. It shows the potential danger is real, even if the original wasn't quite the mass panic legend claims.
Exactly. Context matters. Vulnerability varies. Belief is powerful.
It's amazing how that broadcast became such a touchstone. And speaking of blurring lines, the 20th century also gave us news satire, shows like The Daily Show. They were funny, but did they also muddy the waters?
That's the paradox, isn't it? Shows like The Daily Show, starting in '96, The Colbert Report in 2005, they became really important, self-described fake news shows in the U.S.
Right, they were critiquing the news.
Yeah, for many viewers, especially younger ones, they became a kind of corrective to and substitute for mainstream journalism, but they also, maybe unintentionally, blurred those lines between what was real news and what was commentary or parody. Sometimes the satire wasn't obvious to everyone. It kind of contributed to this feeling that maybe all news is just a performance, a simulation of reality, as one source puts it.
So trying to expose fakeness might have made people more cynical about everything.
It's a complex effect. And you saw it with print satire, too, like The Onion, which started online around '98.
Oh yeah, The Onion is brilliant, but people sometimes think it's real.
All the time. The classic example is their story, Kim Jong-un, named The Onion's sexiest man alive for 2012.
I remember that.
It was reported as actual news by China's official People's Daily and the Korean Times.
Seriously. That's incredible.
It got so common that the hashtag #NotTheOnion started for real news stories that sound like satire. Just shows how easily context collapses online and satire gets mistaken for fact.
Wow. Okay, so beyond satire, what other big hoaxes stand out from that pre-digital or early digital era? You mentioned the spaghetti harvest.
Ah, yes, the spaghetti harvest hoax. 1957, BBC's Panorama program, very respected, serious news show, with the very distinguished journalist Richard Dimbleby narrating.
And they heard what?
A segment supposedly showing the annual spaghetti harvest in Switzerland, complete with footage of happy families picking strands of spaghetti off trees.
No. Off trees?
Off trees. And apparently the BBC switchboard was then flooded with calls from people wondering where they might get a spaghetti tree of their own.
People wanted spaghetti trees. That's hilarious, but also worrying.
It really shows public gullibility, doesn't it? But also, crucially, the power of a credible source. It was the BBC. It must be true. Authority trumped absurdity.
That's a key theme, isn't it? Trust in the source. What about darker stuff like the protocols?
Ah, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Early 20th century, utterly infamous and incredibly damaging. It claimed to be the minutes of a secret meeting of Jewish leaders plotting world domination.
But it wasn't real.
Not even close. It was fabricated by the Russian secret police, cobbled together from other unrelated fictional sources, pure anti-Semitic propaganda.
And the impact?
Devastating. Used to justify pogroms in Tsarist Russia, heavily used by the Nazis. Hitler quotes it in Mein Kampf. Henry Ford even distributed 500,000 copies in the U.S.
And people still believe it?
Shockingly, yes. Despite being debunked countless times, it's still in print, still believed by millions globally. It shows how a malicious lie, tapping into deep prejudice, can take on a life of its own and persist for over a century. A truly deadly lie.
It's terrifying how long that one has lasted. Any other big forgery cases?
Well, there was the Hitler Diaries hoax in 1983. The German magazine Stern announced they'd found 60 volumes of Hitler's personal diaries. Paid a fortune. Huge sensation. Completely fake. Forensic analysis showed the handwriting was wrong. The paper and ink were modern. Lots of it was just plagiarized from other books. The journalist and the forger both went to jail.
So even major news outlets can get totally fooled if they want to believe something badly enough.
Exactly. Desire for a scoop overriding due diligence. It happens.
It really is striking how satire, trying to be critical, could accidentally add to the confusion. And as the world got more connected, TV, radio, the scale and impact just grew and grew. We learned to trust these new sources.
Which just opened up new doors for deception, new vulnerabilities.
Right, which brings us crashing into the late 20th, early 21st century, the internet. social media, and everything changes again.
Oh boy, does it change. This is where things just accelerate beyond anything we'd seen before. The internet, then social media. It wasn't just an amplification. It fundamentally transformed everything. It ushered in this 21st century information disorder.
How so? What was the fundamental shift?
It dramatically multiplied the risks, as our sources say. Misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, hoaxes. They became way more prevalent, way more impactful. The core shift was moving from the old media model, which was one-to-many.
Like a TV station broadcasting out.
Right, to a many-to-many system. Now, errors, lies, propaganda, they go viral through peer-to-peer distribution.
I mean, we share it with each other.
Exactly. It spreads rapidly, widely, totally bypassing the traditional gatekeepers, editors, producers, fact-checkers. Plus, suddenly, anyone with a connection can be a publisher, and anyone can be a target.
It sounds like chaos.
It's been called information chaos, and we've seen it play out in major events. Look at the Syrian civil war starting 2011. That wasn't just a ground war. It was a massive information war online.
How did that work?
Adversaries constantly spreading misinformation on social media, trying to discredit each other. The International Committee of the Red Cross literally described the situation there as information chaos.
Any specific examples?
Well, President Assad dismissed reports of a chemical attack that killed dozens as 100% fabrications. Claimed photos of child victims were staged.
But they weren't.
No. Collaborative forensic reporting, like by the New York Times, fact-checked him and concluded the Syrian government had dropped a chlorine bomb. It shows how digital tools let state actors deny atrocities, but also how they empower fact-checking and citizen investigation. A double-edged sword.
Definitely. What about that photo doctoring case in Egypt?
2010. The state-run newspaper Al Aram photoshopped a picture, world leaders walking to peace talks. They moved President Mubarak from the back of the group right to the front.
Seriously, just photoshopped him leading the pack.
Yep. But here's the digital age twist. An Egyptian blogger spotted it almost immediately and exposed it online. So it shows the boldness of digital manipulation, but also the new power of citizen oversight to call it out instantly.
The internet giveth, the internet taketh away. What about the financial angle? Did fake news start impacting markets?
Big time. There's a cautionary tale from Australia in 2013. Several major media outlets fell for a hoax press release.
What did it say?
It looked like it was from ANZ Bank, claiming they were pulling $1.2 billion in funding for a controversial coal project.
But it was fake. Who sent it?
An anti-coal campaigner created it. He even put his own phone number on it instead of the bank executive.
And the media ran with it.
Some did, yeah. The perils of speed before accuracy, as one source called it. The result? Shares in the coal company, Whitehaven Coal, plunged 6%, wiped $300 million off its value almost instantly.
Wow. Real money, real impact from one fake digital message.
Exactly. Shows the vulnerability of markets and how fast digital fakes can move.
And sometimes it's just weird, like the video game footage.
Oh, that one. 2015, an Egyptian TV news anchor. He's praising Russia's intervention in Syria, showing this dramatic footage he claims is Russian airstrikes.
Let me guess.
Yep. Someone quickly identified it as footage from a 5-year-old YouTube video of a Russian video game.
Oh, come on.
It just shows how easily visual stuff gets grabbed, decontextualized, and accepted uncritically, especially if it fits a narrative people want to believe.
It's so clear the digital world isn't just faster. It lets fake stuff embed itself in totally new ways, blurring entertainment and fact, creating fake realities.
Yeah.
This whole user-generated content thing means anyone can publish, anyone can be duped. The sheer volume and speed, it's just overwhelming.
It fundamentally changes our relationship with information and with truth itself.
Okay, so connecting this bigger picture. We're seeing new reasons why people create this stuff, right? And scary new technologies making it easier and harder to spot. It's not just lying anymore. It's about making money from lies, fighting wars with lies, even using the term fake news as a weapon.
You've absolutely hit on the critical evolution. The digital age reshaped the why and the how, a huge shift. Direct financial gain as a primary driver.
Making money from fake news. How?
We saw the rise of things like troll farms and fake news for profit setups. Remember Vilas, Macedonia, before the 2016 U.S. election?
Vaguely, yeah. What was happening there?
Teenagers running over 100 pro-Trump websites, pumping out totally fabricated stories, the Pope endorsing Trump, Hillary Clinton about to be indicted. Wild stuff.
And they made money.
They profited significantly, our sources say, from automated ads like Google AdSense placed on their pages. The more sensational and false the content, the more clicks, the more ad revenue, a real digital gold rush for misinformation.
So it wasn't even about politics for them, just cash.
For many, yes. And it wasn't just overseas. BuzzFeed found hyperpartisan news sites based in Florida, churning out false stuff targeting both liberals and conservatives.
Why target both?
Just to run up their metrics or advertising revenue. It was all about generating confected outrage and getting massive Facebook engagement, which translates to ad dollars.
Which connects to clickbait, right? Those misleading headlines.
Exactly. Clickbait headlines designed to encourage the online reader to click through. Not all clickbait is fake news, but it's essential to the business of fake news. It drives traffic, redirects people, makes money.
There's even an economic formula for it.
Sort of. Fraudster economics. It suggests people will create fake news if potential benefits, money, psychological satisfaction outweigh the costs, like getting caught, investment, etc. It highlights how calculated it can be. It's a business model for some.
Okay, so money is a big new driver. What about political or ideological reasons? How has digital changed that game?
It's given political manipulation unprecedented new tools and reach. Look at the U.S. election in 2016. Research found people shared almost as much fake news as real news on Twitter around Election Day.
Any specific examples that stood out?
Well, Pizzagate, that completely fabricated story about a child abuse ring in a pizza place. It led to a man actually firing an assault rifle inside the restaurant. Real-world violence sparked by online lies.
That was terrifying. And wasn't there foreign interference, too?
Facebook admitted an operation, likely Russian, spent $100,000 on thousands of ads pushing divisive content. The New York Times documented Russian operators creating fake Americans on Facebook and Twitter, using bots to blast out anti-Clinton messages, a really sophisticated, multi-layered effort.
And Brexit. Similar patterns.
Yes. Analysis of social media around the Brexit vote found Brexit supporters were way more active on platforms like Instagram, and there were reports of hundreds of thousands of pro-Leave tweets sent by foreign accounts on polling day itself. The digital battleground was fierce.
It sounds like these operations are becoming almost standard practice.
There are specialists now, like the Colombian hacker Andres Sepulveda. He claimed he interfered in presidential elections across 9 Latin American countries over 8 years.
Oh.
Stealing campaign plans, using social media to create false waves of enthusiasm and derision, installing spyware, basically digital espionage and manipulation as a service.
That's next level. And it can spill over into real geopolitical crises.
Yes, definitely. The Qatari state news agency hack in 2017 called the first major geopolitical crisis, sparked by a computer hack.
What happened?
Hackers planted a totally fabricated news story on the agency's site. Fake quotes from Qatar's leader criticizing Trump, praising Iran. Other regional media picked it up, amplified by bots and trolls. It nearly turned into a real physical conflict, the first fake news war almost.
Wow. And even reputable companies get involved in this.
Sometimes. Remember Bell Pottinger, the big UK PR firm? They collapsed in 2018. Exposed for running a large-scale fake news propaganda war in South Africa, they were paid by the controversial Gupta family to stir up racial tensions and discredit critics of then-President Zuma. Websites, bots, fake ads, the works.
And the journalists who exposed them?
Faced intense online harassment. It shows the dangerous link between these campaigns and attacks on the press.
It's frightening how organized this is. But you mentioned it's not just people anymore. We have non-human tools creating and spreading this stuff. AI.
Precisely. This is where it gets really sci-fi, but it's happening now. Artificial intelligence, AI, and deepfakes.
Deepfakes. Those super realistic fake videos.
Exactly. Hyper-realistic videos depict someone saying and doing things that never happened. Using AI to swap faces, perfectly sync lips to fake audio, even make one person's face mimic another's expressions.
So you literally can't believe your eyes anymore.
It shatters that idea, yeah. Visual evidence becomes questionable. And it's not just videos. Large generative AI models like ChatGPT, they've opened the space for the massive creation of textual and visual fake news.
Meaning AI can just write fake news articles or create fake images.
On a huge scale. It takes manipulation to an entirely new level. Massive challenges for detection and regulation ahead.
And AI helps spread it too. Bots.
Yep. Social bots, automated accounts. They're an effective tool for sharing fake news, responsible for spreading most of the false information on social media platforms, according to some studies.
How do they work?
They just automatically retweet, like, and share specific content, creating this false buzz. Makes a fake story look popular, tricks real users into sharing it. Estimates suggest millions of accounts on Twitter and Facebook might be bots. They were even found amplifying stuff around COVID-19 vaccines.
So AI creating it, bots spreading it, that sounds like an explosive blend, as you said, especially in conflicts.
Absolutely. Fake news is now a critical aspect of information warfare. Social media is the battleground, and there's this strong spillover effect. Fake stuff starts online, then gets picked up by mainstream media, blurring the lines even further. It poisons the whole information ecosystem.
And then there's the term fake news itself being used as a weapon.
A huge development. The term has become two-dimensional. It's a genre, false articles designed to look like news,
Right.
but it's also become a label, a weapon. President Trump famously started using fake news to attack journalists and news outlets he didn't like. CNN, the Fake News Awards.
I remember that.
And that tactic went global. Other leaders, like Maduro in Venezuela, started using it against international media, calling it the era of post-truth. It's used to delegitimize any reporting they find unfavorable.
So the very term meant to describe the problem is used to shut down legitimate criticism.
Exactly. It undermines the whole idea of objective truth, makes it harder for anyone to trust any source. A really insidious turn.
This really does raise a huge question. If fake news is a product, a weapon, if AI is making and spreading it, if the term itself is twisted, how on earth do we figure out what's true? How do we not just get completely overwhelmed and cynical about everything? How do we stay informed?
That is the question, isn't it? The central challenge.
So faced with all this digital tsunami of manufactured stuff, what are we actually doing about it? Are societies, institutions getting any better at spotting this stuff? What does the future look like for finding information we can actually trust?
It's the critical issue, and the responses are coming from lots of different angles. There have been major calls for action, international declarations. Back in 2017, you had big international bodies. The UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression, OSCE, OAS, the African Commission issue a joint statement.
What did they say?
Expressed serious alarm at the spread of disinformation and propaganda, and especially attacks on media outlets using the fake news label. They pointed out that when public officials attack the media, it wrecks public trust and makes journalists less safe. A really strong, unified message.
And intelligence agencies got involved too.
Yes, particularly after 2016. That U.S. intelligence assessment in 2017 from the CIA, NSA, FBI explicitly stated Russian actors used trolls and social media to influence the election. Later, Google, Facebook, Twitter all confirmed they found Russian accounts spreading political content. Then in 2018, the U.S. Justice Department actually indicted Russian nationals and an agency for conspiracy creating fake online personas, pushing divisive messages, even staging rallies.
So moving from condemning it to trying to prosecute it.
Exactly. A significant step. And governments started looking inward too. Around 2017, countries like the UK, the Philippines, Australia launched parliamentary inquiries into fake news.
Trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah, grappling with tough questions. What is fake news? Where's the line between biased commentary and outright lies? And a big one. Should the tech giants, Google, Facebook, Twitter, be regulated more like traditional broadcasters? Should they have to fund public interest journalism?
Those are huge questions. What about the EU?
The European Union had a high-level expert group report in 2018. They recommended things like more transparency about online news sources and how stories spread, boosting media literacy skills, creating tools to empower users and journalists. Interestingly, though, that report specifically did not call for state regulation.
Why not?
Suggests a preference maybe for education, transparency, user empowerment over potentially heavy-handed government rules or censorship. Finding that balance is key.
But some countries have brought in regulations, right?
They have, and it shows different approaches and the risks involved. Germany's Network Enforcement Act, NetzDG, from 2018 is a strong example. It forces social media platforms to remove illegal content, like hate speech, within 24 hours or face massive fines up to 50 million euros.
Wow, that's serious pressure on the platforms.
Very serious. But critics worry it could lead to over-removal of legitimate content just to avoid fines. Then you had Malaysia's anti-fake news law in 2018. It criminalized wholly or partly false news with big fines and prison time.
That sounds potentially broad.
Extremely broad. And tellingly, it was abolished after a change in government, showing how politically charged these laws can be, potentially used to silence opposition. Kenya also brought in a law in 2018 with penalties for intentionally publishing false or misleading data.
So it's a global trend, considering these laws.
Seems to be. Singapore, the Philippines, Cambodia, Belarus, Brazil reports say they've all been considering or working on similar anti-fake news legislation, but there's pushback too.
Like what?
A really important ruling came from the ECOWAS Regional Court of Justice in West Africa in 2018. They found that Gambia's old laws on sedition, false news, and criminal defamation actually violated freedom of expression.
So a court saying these kinds of laws can go too far.
Exactly. It served as a timely reminder, as one source put it, of the risks these regulations pose to free speech. It's a constant tightrope walk. Fight disinformation, but don't kill legitimate expression.
It absolutely sounds like a tricky balance. Trying to stop the bad stuff without censoring genuine debate or giving governments tools to silence critics. But even with all these efforts, what about the deeper problems, those human vulnerabilities? It feels like some hoaxes just refuse to die no matter what.
That's painfully true. History gives us some stark reminders. Remember the Piltdown Man?
Vaguely. Ancient human skull hoax, right?
Exactly. It lasted for 41 years, from 1912 to 1953, presented as this amazing missing link between apes and humans, and it completely misled research on human evolution for decades.
41 years. How did it last so long?
That's the crucial part. It was accepted partly because it conveniently fit what scientists expected or wanted to find, that the brain evolved before the jaw changed. And there was national pride involved, too. The British wanted their own first Britain.
So it confirmed biases.
Precisely. It wasn't definitively exposed until 1953, revealed to be just a medieval human skull combined with an orangutan jaw and chimp teeth, all stained to look old. It's a powerful lesson in how hard it is to debunk something, even for experts, if it tells them what they wanted to see. Confirmation bias is incredibly powerful.
That's a sobering thought. And more recently, things like Cambridge Analytica.
Right, the Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2018, that blew the lid off how personal data scraped from millions of Facebook users was used for psychological profiling and micro-targeted political messaging.
To influence the U.S. election and Brexit.
That was the claim. Undercover recordings caught executives bragging about using data to target people with propaganda and misinformation. It showed the sheer scale and sophistication of modern, data-driven influence campaigns, often happening completely covertly. A real wake-up call about data privacy and manipulation.
And the human cost can be severe too, right?
Ah.
It's just for journalists trying to expose this stuff.
Absolutely devastating. There was that unprecedented joint statement by 5 UN special rapporteurs in 2018 about the Indian journalist Rana Ayub.
What was happening to her?
She was facing prolific online harassment fueled by disinformation, including deepfake pornographic videos falsely claiming to be her, just horrific targeted attacks, often linked to government supporters, aimed at silencing independent voices.
And politicians still use the fake news label to deflect.
All the time. Australia's Immigration Minister Peter Dutton dismissed legitimate criticism of his policies based on what sources called alt-right propaganda about South Africa. He just called the criticism nonsense, fabricated, fake news, weaponizing the term to shut down scrutiny.
So it's this constant battle. And then you have things like the pandemic.
Yeah.
The infodemic.
Exactly. COVID-19, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, they really highlighted this concept of an infodemic. Just an overwhelming flood of information, some true, some false, making it incredibly hard for ordinary people to find reliable guidance when they need it most. It increases vulnerability across society.
And looking ahead, does it get easier?
The consensus seems to be probably not. Fake news is predominantly digital and is likely to be more digital in the future, with AI and machine learning constantly getting better.
It's going to get even more sophisticated, harder to spot.
That's the prediction. More sophisticated and more difficult to detect and counter. New AI tools, new digital channels. It means this challenge isn't going away, it's evolving. Media literacy becomes a moving target.
It really hammers home that fighting fake news isn't just about debunking specific lies. It's about building resilience, critical thinking across society in this digital world that keeps changing so fast. A constant learning curve for all of us. We have to look deeper.
Ultimately, that's what this deep dive shows, I think. Deception. It's ancient. But the tools, the motives, the sheer scale of impact, fundamentally transformed by technology, especially now. That line between truth and lies is blurring like never before. And it's a profound challenge, a civilization one, really, that needs our constant collective attention and critical thinking. The stakes for figuring out what's real, they've never been higher.
So as you, our listeners, are scrolling through your feeds, watching the news, reading articles, maybe you remember this long history we've talked about. Don't just ask, what am I reading or hearing? Take that extra second to ask why. Why is this information being shown to me this way? And maybe, who benefits if I believe this? That's where the real deep dive happens in your own critical thinking, your own ongoing curiosity. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and please keep striving to stay truly well-informed in this crazy, complex information age we live in.